Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to continue on with learning about the tools of the course, and we're going to talk about reproducible research with R Markdown and Quarto. So, what is R Markdown and what is Quarto? So, R Markdown is a product slash package. So, it is a product, but also there are these things in R called packages made from the people at our studio, which is now called Posit. So lots of things going on here. So I have a URL here that you can click and look at R Markdown's full capabilities if you want to. But I'll give you a bit of a synopsis here. So prior to 2022, people used R Markdown for a lot of different stuff. Okay? The features of R Markdown that are going to be really nice for us is that, well, R Markdown is actually a markup language. So there's a thing called regular Markdown, not associated with R at all. Okay? And Markdown is a markup language. Now, very quickly, a markup language is something where you write some code, or you write what you want to write, and then it renders it nicely after you do something. So almost everything that you interact with on the computer is a markup language of sorts. So when you're writing a document, and you probably write your papers in Word. Okay? So when you use Microsoft Word or you use something else similar to Word, you write the document, you write your words, and they show up. And then when you save the Word document, it looks just like it did when you wrote it. Yeah, nothing changes. And so that is, it's not really marking up anything. So that's a very simple markup language. You'll see in a second, or in a little bit, with Markdown, R Markdown, Quarto, so on and so forth, these things that we're going to learn about, you're going to write some code that you're going to write stuff. So not just code, but regular words in a document. And you might put some different markings around the document. So quotation marks, the multiplication symbol, the ampersand, the parentheses. So different symbols like that you'll put around the words, that when you render the document, it's going to change how that word looks in the final process. So it's going to do something to what you wrote to make it look prettier. Okay? And that's a markup language. Okay, so that has a lot of capabilities. It might seem like you're actually making your life harder, which at first is true, but it will hopefully get a little bit better once you learn it more. Okay, so that's one thing that may or may not be a plus. The big plus is that you are able to weave text, code, and graphics all in one document. So I'm going to ask you to write code and show me that code to make graphs, lots of graphs, and write about them. If I told you that and I gave you no other instructions, you would probably make all your stuff in R and then put it in a Word document, unless you're used to markup languages, and not many people are. But that is clunky compared to what I'm going to show you. So no more copy and paste into a Word document, because, well, Word is easy to use in some ways, but if you're trying to put a picture in and put it just right and so on and so forth, it can be a big old pain. And not to say that R Markdown is not a pain. It can be at times, but it's going to make that part of your life much easier. And so that's the big reason that we're going to use this, is I can write text and code and graphics in all one document, no copy paste necessary. Okay. the third bullet point, fully reproducible reports, is a really important aspect of our Markdown and what we'll see its newest version, Quarto. Really important, but probably something that won't make sense at the moment. Okay? But what I mean by fully reproducible reports are that if you give me the Quarto document, so if you run an analysis, whatever that means, who cares? Okay, you run an analysis on data, and then you have the results and you present the results. If you give me that Quarto document, that R Markdown document, whatever we'll see in just a second, I should be able to run that report, run that document, and get the exact same thing. Or if it's different, it should make sense why it's different. And so that's not always true with other things. There is a reproducibility issue in science in general that is a big problem that people are very concerned about. And so being reproducible is a good thing. And so that's another reason why we're using it. And there are multiple output types. So you can make a PDF, an HTML file, a Word, a Microsoft Word document, a website, so on and so forth. There are lots of different options in what you can make. Now that's our Markdown, the predecessor to the new version, the next generation of R Markdown, which is called Quarto. So Quarto is very much like R Markdown, but it fixes some sticking points that people had and offers some new features. One of the features that, again, we won't get to in this class, but I thought I should bring it to everyone's attention, is that it makes a bigger deal than R Markdown at being multilingual. Okay. Now, in truth, it does the same. R Markdown had the same capabilities, but the name R Markdown kind of implied that it was only for R, but it did very much more than R. So Quarto, in a Quarto document, you can write Python, R, Julia, and Observable. So 4 different languages that you can write inside of this document. So it's not made just for R, it's made for a lot of the main computing languages that are in data science. Okay, so R Markdown and Quarto. So here is a very short slide that I'm not going to read all of about reproducible research. You can pause the video and read this, internalize it, and I'll talk about it later on in the course. But reproducible research is a good thing and something that we should strive to. Okay, so let's now actually get to the demo part. So I'm in my version of RStudio at the moment. Okay, I have a few things in my environment. I'm actually going to clear them. Okay, but I want to make a Quarto document. So before, in videos that you saw, I was writing strictly in an R script file. Okay, that is a place where you can write R code, but I would prefer, and I'm going to give you assignments that are Quarto documents. So you will, by necessity, need to be okay with using a Quarto document. So when you click Quarto document, okay, I used this white page with a plus sign next to it, but you can also use File, New File, and then you've got all the files. So our Quarto document. It will both open up this pop-up window, and so you can make a document, you can make a presentation, or you can make an interactive website kind of thing. Okay, we of course want document. I'll keep it called, I'll call it test doc. My name is Grant Innerst. You don't need to necessarily put things in there, but you can. Okay, and then it gives you 3 options down here: an HTML file, a PDF, or a Word document. Now, I tend to like a PDF, but there are things that you need to make a PDF. So it tells you here PDF output requires LaTeX installation. So LaTeX here is for fancy math symbols and also PDFs. And so a nice thing about Posit Cloud is that it has the capability, right away you open it, it can render a PDF. Okay? You've got some work to do if you want to render a PDF on your machine. I'm not going to go through that in a video, okay, on how to install LaTeX at a big level. Okay? But if you want to do this and you're going to use your personal machine, okay, look at this website. So Yiwei made Quarto and our Markdown, or did a lot of work on them, and they have a LaTeX version, which is LaTeX is like 8 gigabytes of space by itself, which is very large. TinyTeX is much smaller. So if you go to this website, it will tell you how to download TinyTeX in R, which is very simple. And so it really isn't that hard to create a PDF, but if you're scared of such things, you can use Posit Cloud, at least to start. Okay, but anyway, so a PDF create. Now it opens up this document, and by default, it looks like, actually it starts to look like this. Now the first thing that you want to know is that there are 2 different types of things here. So visual and source. So by default, a Quarto document looks like this. So this is the source code. Okay, and so as I said before, in a Markdown document there are special things, special symbols that mean special things. So one of them you see is right here. So it gives you some output to see how you might want to write this. So here they wrote a website, https://quarto.org. Okay, they write that, but without this, it recognizes that it's a URL by putting an underline through it, but it's not going to make it a hyperlink unless I put less than greater than around it. And so that's one example of a sort of meta character that does something special. Down here, if you look, there are 2 stars around render on either side. That does something special. And then down here, we have not quite the comma, or not quite the apostrophe, but the forward apostrophe sort of thing. And it also does something special that you want to keep in mind. Okay, and so those are the special things that make Markdown Markdown. Okay, now that's source, something that RStudio added that I think you'll really like. I personally don't like it, but don't let my disdain for it sway you. I'm sure you will really like it, and that is a visual editor. And so this basically turns your experience into using a Word document. Okay, and so the visual editor, Word is a visual editor. So Microsoft Word is a visual editor, and so this is going to very much look like Word. So if I wanted to say this word, so Quarto enables you to weave together content, so on and so forth. If I wanted to bold Quarto, I could just come up here and click bold, and it's going to bold it. Okay. Now, if you switch back to source, you'll see that it just put the 2 stars around Quarto, and so now I know that the 2 stars around a word automatically mean bolding. Okay? So that's a really nice way to learn the special things. So if you do go to the website, they give you lots of things from this website. Probably the guard, Markdown Basics. So the guide, sorry. If you go to Markdown Basics, you can see all of what the formatting means. Headings, links and images, lists, so on and so forth. These are just basic Markdown stuff. If you take 30 minutes, I think you'll know Markdown pretty well. Okay? But the visual editor is a nice way, a nice crutch, so to speak, to get you started, where you can write code, write your words, write whatever, and it will show you as it would be rendered. Okay, so I'll switch back to source for now. So there are a couple different important parts about a Quarto document. These first 6, here we have 6 lines. It will change every time depending on what's here. You can add more, but this, so the 3 dashes to start and the 3 dashes to end are called a YAML header. So anything inside lines 1 through 6 are called a header, and the language that you are writing here is called YAML, Y-A-M-L. You aren't going to really want to touch this a lot when you do stuff, okay? So here's the title and here's the author, which we specified when we created the document. So that you changed in the creation. So of course, if you want to change that, you can here. Okay, and so then after the YAML header, the document starts, and so you can write whatever you want. So you might start with a header. So here's the level 2 header called, and they're calling it Quarto. They talk about what Quarto is, so on and so forth. Okay, and so when you just start writing, like that, it will be rendered as regular text. Okay? So when you write just in the document as it is, they're regular text. Okay? And you can do special things to it, like the stars, like the many other things that you can do. Okay? Now, this lines 18 through 20. Oh, sorry. In lines 18 through 20, you see something new. If you look at this, the shading of lines 18 through 20, they're different than all of the other lines. You also see it in 24 through 27 down here. These are called code chunks. So this is where you write code. Code chunks are started with these slashes, or these, I don't know what the technical term is, but dash, 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 okay, starts it. So, and then you have curly braces. Inside the curly braces, you have the language that you're going to use. So by default, it's the lowercase r. So dash, 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 that's not a dash, but these 3 symbols to start, curly braces, language, you write your code, and then to end, the 3 symbols again. If you take one away, it's going to think all of that is code. So it's important that the 3 to start, 3 to finish, to make a code chunk. So inside the code chunk, you can do, say, command return. And what our Markdown does that is nice behavior sometimes, but can be annoying at other times, is that it will put the output right below the chunk. You'll also see that it ran over here in the console. Right? But if you're looking in a document, that can be very nice that you don't have to move your eyes all the way over to the console to see what was run and then all the way back, that it gives you the stuff right there. Okay, so when you execute code inside the stuff, inside the chunks, sorry, it will run them. And it'll show you the output below, and it'll also run it over here in the console, which is great. Okay? So I will give you all of the assignments that you get will be in Quarto documents, or they will ask you to create Quarto documents. And so this is how you're going to write your stuff. So you'll write your answers, reflections, so on and so forth. If I ask for writing, you'll just write it in the regular lines. If I'm asking you to write code, I'll often give you a starter chunk where I want you to write code. But if you want to create new chunks, all you have to do is the 3 ticks, curly braces, language, and 3 ticks, and that's a code chunk. Okay. Now, one more thing about code chunks that you'll see up here in line 25, it has a special thing that says, well, it has the pound and then a vertical bar and then a space, echo, false. Okay. This is called a chunk option. So there are many different chunk options that you can change. So basically you can change the behavior of a chunk through this. There are 2 different places that you can write chunk options. One is following specifically these 2 symbols. So if I wanted to write something else, I just clicked return and it automatically gave me a second one of these, which is expected behavior. Okay? And I could type another chunk option here, or inside what's called the hook, which is the top, so inside the curly braces, okay, I put a comma and then I just gave a space, and it was nice and it gave me all of the chunk options. So there are a lot of chunk options. A lot of them have to do with figures, okay? But there are lots of different chunk options. So one of them, I might say cache equals true. So notice the difference in how I specified down here with a colon, up here with an equal sign. So both are correct, but you can't flip them. So you couldn't say cache equals true in line 25, and you couldn't say echo false in line 24. Okay. Inside the chunk, so these top ones, this is how you had to do it in our Markdown. This, in line 25, is an added feature of Quarto. Okay. I'll let you choose which one you want to do. Both are valid. Okay. And so, of course, different ones of them mean different things. Okay, we'll take away the cache is true, and we'll add something down here. A is assigned the value of 2. Okay, so I've written my report. I've done some great work here, and I want to render it. I want to make the PDF. Okay, there are a couple of different options. The first thing that you need to do is save your document. Okay, so right now it's just called Untitled 1. It cannot render an untitled document, so it'll ask you to save it when you try to render. Okay, so we're going to be preemptive and save this document. Now, the important thing to remember here is you cannot have any spaces in the name. It will not run if you have a space in the name. So do not put any spaces in the names. Okay, underscore is the preferred one. So test underscore document, okay, is what I would like. The dot is a little weird because it can mean different things. You can include no spaces. You could say just test doc. You'll see that I like underscores, and so I want you to give an effort to make underscores as well. Okay, so I saved that document. Now it is saved, okay, and I want to render the document. Now, there's a button up here that you can click on to render the document. And if you hover over it, it'll actually show you the keyboard shortcut for rendering, which for me is Shift-Command-K. For people on a non-Mac, Shift-Control-K. Okay, so I'm gonna type Shift-Command-K all together, and so you'll see something changed on the right-hand side. It's running a background job. Okay. And so it did some stuff, and it also opened the document for me. So now I've created a PDF. And so here's the PDF. Most of it was already there, but I'm now writing words, which is what I wrote. Okay, see that it's regular text there. And then down here I wrote A is 2. Okay. Notice, so the chunk option in part 2, if we go back to the regular document, it says echo is false. And so for lines 18 through 20, it wrote the code 1 plus 1, and the result is 2. If you look at the document, you can see the code and also the result. I echoed equals false here. Code is 2 times 2, result is 4. Now you only see the result, which is 4. So if there's ever a case in which you want to show the result and not the code, you would use the chunk option, echo is false. Now, for this class, I want to see all of your code. No matter how much it is, no matter how ugly it is, I want to see it. And so never echo equals false. But when you get to the final project and you want to write a professional-ish report, you may want to not include the code. And so that's where you might want to do echo is false. That's only one of the many options that you have in chunk options. Okay, so that's rendering a document. So you can either click this or Shift, Control, or Command K. Now, when you make a mistake, when you make an error, so hopefully you have code that does run, but when you make an error, so I have nowhere defined, down here I defined A as 2, but I've not defined B yet. So if I run B here, it gives me an error, B not found. So if I try to include this in my document, and I try to render my document, I get an error on the right-hand side. You're eventually going to get an error. No matter how hard you try, you will have an execution halted, I'm sure. Everyone does. I do all the time. And so when you get an error execution halted, what you should do is look up above, okay, above the execution halted line to see error object B not found. Okay, and so then you can go back and diagnose that I haven't defined B yet. If I define B as 4, and then call B, which is what I've done down here, then it runs fine. Okay, and so that's important because you'll see that error often. It's important to not get too freaked out and just look above and see what the error says, because it can probably help you. Okay. Now, the other very common problem that people will get very frustrated with is this. When I could if I wanted to. Again, not something that I would suggest. I define, in just working around trying to understand R doing something, I define C as 4 in my console. And I can access C, I can multiply C by 2, I can do all kinds of stuff to it. Okay? And so I worked with C over here, which is great. And then I come over here and I say C. Okay, now if I ran this code, it's in the document, I run C, it says 4, everything works fine. When I render this code, and I look down here, well, okay, so it gives me, it runs, and it gives me a weird result. I run C, and it says a function of something, and then it's a primitive, which is something that we don't need to talk about right now. It turns out that C, the lowercase c, is a function that we'll use a lot. So let's try it with D. D is 10. Okay, D is 10. I come over here, I ask for D. I run this, and it gives me an error. And the error is object D not found. Okay? Which is going to be, well, very confusing for you, because over here I have 40, and I hit command return on D, and it says 10. But yet, when I try to run my background, when I try to render my document, it says object D not found. Okay? The important thing, one of the very most important things that you want to keep in mind about a Quarto document is that when it renders, it creates a fresh version of R that has not seen anything you've done in the console. So anything that exists in this environment down here, which are C and D right now, okay, it doesn't see them at all. And so when you try to run things, if you run them in the console and do things over here, and then you forget to put them anywhere inside your Quarto document, you're going to get this weird error. And it's frustrating because I can see D, it's right here. And when I run D, it exists. But when I try to render it, it doesn't exist, right? Which is very frustrating. That's because it exists in your environment, but not in the environment that the Quarto document runs in. It creates its own fresh version of R, and unless you define it in the Quarto document, it's not going to see it. So if I do define it, it of course sees it, and everything works well. Okay, so those are the two big sticking points that people have with learning how to use a Quarto document. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background, enough to start using a Quarto document. Now, I guess one last thing, one trick is there is a shift. Sorry, had to try a few different combinations. For me, Option Command I or Option Control I for you will give you a hook, an entire chunk. So if you don't want to write all those things out, Option Command or Option Control I will give you a hook. Okay, so that's I've talked probably too long again about Quarto, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background about Quarto documents and why we use them.